Good evening, and welcome to the program Talk with Tashi, a program dedicated to young people, adolescents, and adults, discussing your issues and solutions with Tashi. And now, here is your host, Tashi.
Welcome to another episode of Talk with Tashi. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. And as usual, I have a very special guest today, and I'm going to introduce him to let you know just who he is. Mr. Andrew Pitkin is an astute professional with 2 decades of experience in education. He served as a classroom teacher, year supervisor, dean of discipline prior to joining the Ministry of Education and Youth as a safety and security coordinator, and more recently, assistant registrar, where he now regulates independent schools. Andrew is the middle child of the Honorable Bishop Conrad Pitkin, Custos Rotolorum of St. James, and Mrs. Deverly Pitkin, a retired principal. As Dean of Discipline, resolving conflicts between students was inevitable, and as Assistant Registrar, complaints from students, parents, and teachers against schools are constantly submitted. Welcome to the program, Mr. Andrew Pitkin.
Thank you much, Tashi. Thanks much.
Your involvement in education seems like an exciting one.
It has been interesting. It has been an interesting one.
I can only
Let's keep
imagine.
it that way.
Yeah, so our topic today is conflict. We're talking about conflicts, the realities and the possibilities. And what is interesting about this topic, it's very important because it seems to be at the core of many of the issues we see among our young people and even adults. And I want to bring to your attention this article, 2 articles actually. One of them published in the Gleaner on the 7th of September 2022. And the article title is Deadly Interpersonal Disputes Raise Alarm. Police Commissioner urges parents to teach conflict resolution skills. Imagine that. And what was interesting in terms of the statistics here, it says Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson has urged parents and communities to teach children conflict resolution skills, noting that 15% of the murders committed in Jamaica this year, which would have been 2022, stemmed from interpersonal disputes. And then fast forward to February 10, 2023, the Jamaica Observer had an article, and the title of that article was Structured Proactive Conflict Resolution for a Peaceful Jamaica. And the first thing it says was, a harsh Jamaican reality is that many adults are inclined to violence as a first resort in dealing with disagreements and perceived slights. It explains to some extent the appalling high crime rate. So tell me, what do you think about that? That sounds like the Jamaica we're living in?
It does. It does. It's unfortunate that our tolerance level is extremely low. We somehow, I'm going to say, have chosen to then not give each other an opportunity to explain them or ourselves as varied issues might arise. As human beings, we're all different. We view the world in different ways. So perspectives are going to differ. Our values are going to differ. And in that difference, you find that conflict constantly arises. But there is always a way where it is that those conflicts can be remedied or solved without going to the violence.
Nice. And that's kind of what we want to do, because on this program, we talk about issues and we talk about solutions as well. So let's begin by talking about what conflict is, to put that into perspective so that everybody knows what we mean. What is conflict?
What is conflict? Well, thinking about it, I would jump right off and say that conflict is just the differences that persons will tend to then come across. Difference in views, difference in perspective, difference in morals, difference in values, but just not having that shared idea or perspective on something is the essence of what a conflict would be. So not all conflicts need to then get to the point of either shouting or physically exchanging blows. A conflict is just simply put a difference of perspectives.
Okay. And that's understandable. So based on that then, given that we all have different personalities, different viewpoints and all of that, then conflict is inevitable, right? Now, what would you say is what would you say is the cause? If conflict is inevitable, then why does it seem to always end up in violence?
All right. In my observation and experience over the years, I find that the lack of patience, lack of tolerance, and I'm going to then say what should be just a genuine care for our fellow man, I believe, is what then leads towards that bit where it is that either we then get verbally abusive or physically abusive. There is a word that I like using, empathy or empathizing, but empathy, where we should be able to then assume the role of somebody else to have an idea or get a grasp of what somebody's experiencing. We have all been hurt at some point, all of us. And the thing is, the mere fact that we've been hurt, it simply means that we know what it means or how it feels to be hurt. As a result, if it is that someone has caused harm or is feeling hurt, then we should be able to actually pause from time to time to put ourselves in that person's stead or shoe, to have an idea or grasp how they are feeling, what they are seeing, what they are experiencing. And from that perspective, because I wouldn't want that for myself, let me say if it is that I can actually start the process within, not necessarily attack that person, but attack the problem.
Right.
So it is that we're not harming each other. I think that's where that says, yeah, man.
But all right, so all of that sounds so good. It sounds good. And clearly, our people, even our youth in the high schools and even younger than that, they don't have these skills. How do we teach them? And where, who dropped the ball as it relates to why we are in the predicament that we're in now with just an inability, I would call it, to resolve conflicts in a healthy way?
All right. I believe, you see, I don't like blaming people. I don't like casting the blame. But when I think about it, I look at it from a rather simplistic perspective, where it is that us as adults, we have been tasked to prepare the juniors to become adults. No, the juniors are the children. And the thing is, the first learning space that every single child experiences is home. The very first. So as parents, we have to then recognize that the life that we have been presented, this small life that we have as kids, that we tend to all try to then get, because everybody wants an offspring, everybody wants an heir. But you have the task, it is your responsibility to begin teaching that child how to exist in this world. The world that you're growing into has a multiplicity of people around. Same age group, older, younger. How then do you traverse the world without bringing on conflicts or issues that will then put you at a disadvantage? So the parents, right off the bat, they have a big part to play. I grew up in an era where we would have learned several proverbs, and it was then followed through in the very community that you live, where it says it takes a community to raise a child. What is a community? The community is right there at home. The community is the neighborhood that you're in. The community is the church that you go in. It is the school that you go in. It's all the spaces that you exist in order for them just quite frankly live. So all of us have to then play a part in doing that. While I was dean of discipline at JC, there are times when I would then ensure that I'm at the transport center in halfway tree especially on a Friday evening, and especially during the champs time. I do that because my boys would have then behaved better knowing that I am there in the transport center walking around. I would see students from other schools that do not know me and I don't know them. Oftentimes, male, female, who would then be doing some things that they just should not be doing at their age, 1, 2, in public. And I've stopped and I've spoken to them, mark you with respect.
Right.
I am not their parents. I am not there to there and try to cow them down. So I would go over respectfully, gently, and I would address them with respect. And I found my experience has been there has not been one of those students, no matter how old or young they are, have ever turned to me and tried to then disrespect me. So, Mark, I know that there are some adults who would have said, boy, they didn't have no manners. But the thing is, many times, what is a sort of approach that they would have taken with the children? Instead, respect begets respect. So oftentimes, I believe it is what is said, how is said, that makes a world of a difference to these people.
Especially for teenagers.
Yeah.
And in public, where boys, you're a man, so you would know that they don't do well with crowds.
Not that. No, the least the good thing is a disrespect, and none
That's
of
right.
us disrespected, and so they hold that very, very dear to them.
Yes, that is right. And I love the fact that you spoke about respect, because the truth is there are people who feel that because you are a child or you're a minor, they can speak to you anyway, or in a disrespectful tone, and you are not to retaliate or respond when
Definitely.
even as adults we don't tolerate that. So I like that, and I find it very interesting because I had a conversation recently with a young adult who is one of my students, and he told me, we were talking about the violence in schools, and he told me that when he was in school, he pretty much, hit a boy in his face because of something that he said to him. So I said to him, all right, you were a teenager at the time, you were in high school, and that is how you chose to respond. Said he got suspended for it and so on. And I said to him, you are now an adult, you're in your final year of college, and you're about to graduate. You are going into the classroom now as a teacher. If a student says the same thing to you, will you respond in the same way? And him said, boy, miss, we can't tell us I'm not going to do it again. And I said, why? And he said to me, if I'm in a small group, if it's just me and the student, or it's just like 2-3 people in the space, and that disrespectful comment has come towards me, I would probably say, all right, and leave that alone. But once there is a crowd, miss, me have to lick him down.
All right. And the thing is, I can understand that. I can totally understand. And here's why.
But then, because we've also seen conflicts between teachers and students in the classroom, which I don't know. I need you to help me with this because I feel like it shouldn't happen. I think a teacher, being the adult in the room, should know when the lines are being crossed to do something to prevent it from getting there. And we've even had a story with a dean of discipline and a student. Now, I mean, we're going with what's being reported, but it's just not a good look.
It's not. It's not a good look. And to be honest, I tend to not take too much from when the media reports on much, because I find that the media does not give a fulsome report as to what really happens. I would have seen multiple times when they fail to then carry out a fulsome investigation and present the facts as they should.
That's true.
I, as a male myself, and would have then passed through several schools, and the schools that I've taught at were not always the best. So we've had students that, quite frankly, gives that challenge to teachers. One of the things that I've found, though, is that students are very sensitive to their environment. And when you set a particular tone and you maintain that tone throughout, you find that the students that are there will conform to that tone that you set. So one of the things that as a teacher that I did, at the beginning of the school year, in introducing myself, I laid down some rules for how my class is supposed to go. Number one, I will not start a class without it being neat and without it being free from garbage. I won't shout. So when I enter my class, I'm standing at the door. I'm going to ensure that you see me. And once one person see me, them normally they then say, well, all right, sir is here. And many times they stand, but then that neating of rows and the garbage doesn't move. So when I move to the front of the class, I stand and I look at them. And I wait, not too long, but when they realize that I'm not starting my class, they say, oh, yes, sir did say straighten rows and take up the garbage. And you find that because every single class, that is how I started it. After a while, once I got to the class, they just immediately start to then arrange. No need for me to shout.
So the setting of the tone, setting the ground rules, and in other words, what you did, you communicated expectations. Because I find that, sometimes adults don't do that even in the home. Children just don't know what the expectations are.
Yeah, man.
But at the same time, when they fall below those expectations that have not been communicated, then they are met with verbal abuse a lot of the times, and sometimes even physical.
One of the things that I remember is that from time to time, we would tell children to behave themselves, but we don't really explain to them what we expect or what we anticipate is behaving our oneself. One of the things that, this is me just sharing something where growing up, I'd always try to wonder at what point does somebody move from being a teenager to actually being an adult? And not because by the chronological age that we have, you come out of being 19, you're going to being at 20. That doesn't make you an adult. And I've always thought that that's just not it, because up 21, 22, there is a level of immaturity that we still maintain. I was appreciative of a workshop that I went to several years ago, more than 10 years ago, where the presenter would have shared that on average, the human being does not achieve emotional maturity until approximately 28, between 28 and 32. So we find that many young adults, because that emotional maturity has not yet been achieved, whenever conflicts arise, especially in the classroom between teachers and students, there is a battle to then say who is superior, who is in charge. And as a teenager, there is this self-preservation mode that your mind maintains. So when that disrespect comes to in any form of way that, well, what is perceived as that disrespect? The retaliation normally comes out. And as teachers, as educators, if we fail to then recognize it, there are times when we have to then step back in order for them win the battle. I'm going to call it battle, but in order for them just ensure that it does not get out of hand. There are times when we have to step back. Yeah. There are times, however, it is that you have to step forward and maintain your ground. But you as that person who is there need for them, be able to then assess the situation and make the appropriate call at that time. It is not all the time that you going toe-to-toe with a student is the best. And of course, this is not all the time that you have to always concede, because at times always conceding will simply yield your authority to the child. So definitely setting the tone, maintaining it. What we find is that many times
balance.
A tone may be set at some point, but somewhere along the line, we start to compromise it. And in compromising it, you are giving in to the child.
Yeah.
Because children are going to push. They are going to then test the waters. They are going to test.
Always do. They always do. And that is very key also, because sometimes teachers or adults, even parents, they communicate the expectations, they set the tone, they give the rules and everything, but they just don't have enough backbone to stand their ground when it is necessary to do so. So far we have seen that children actually learn their conflict resolution skills, so to speak, or how to handle conflicts. Their approach to conflict comes from the home, what they observe.
I want to say home and community, because oftentimes, even if it is that it's not in the home there, as soon as they step outside, if John and Paul have a difference, for some reason, John and Paul choose to either reach for a machete, reach for a knife, ice pick, or stone or bottle to be then hurling at each other. And of course, in the recent 10 years, then of course, we see a proliferation of the guns being used. So, so home and the community immediately.
Okay, so the home and the community within which they live. But the John and Paul having the difference out there, it still goes back to the home somewhere,
And that's why it is when you mention about who dropped the ball, and that's it is I don't like casting blame, because if we really going to look at who dropped the ball, it is right across the society.
Right, yeah, that's true.
I also put a lot of blame on our lawmakers, our politicians, because there are several policies that should have and could have been put in place to then promote certain things. So if we recognize that, all right, the community is one of the things that is required for then shape a individual into being a contributing citizen in our country. Then there are certain policies that, as well, even the local governmental representatives need to ensure that the communities have. So it's as though almost all communities will have a community center. But what policies truly drive these community centers? What programs are there, social development programs that are really at the center, where on a weekly basis can you really go for then ensure say this is actually being done? Our youth, for the most part, what really are in the community for our youth to then go out and have what I consider to be clean fun? It's very limited, very limited. I would have seen past several places, and if it is that they do have a community with a football field or a basketball or netball court, it's run down after one. It is normal. It's not even the government who really puts it there. It is normally some NGO that puts it there, not the government.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching this episode with the conversation, the talk that Mr. Andrew Pitkin and I started on the whole matter of conflict. Now, I hope you recognize that conflict is inevitable. It is something that must come. How we approach conflict, how we manage conflict is going to determine the outcome, of course. And we know that our approach, when we look at young people and how they are approaching conflict and how they manage conflict, how they address conflict, it is an indication of what they have been exposed to from the home or even within the community. So families need to be more intentional in how they model that whole matter of conflict management, conflict resolution, and then be intentional in teaching and training our children as to how they are to deal with conflict. It doesn't always have to end with physical altercations and disrespect to the bone and all of these negative things. These are not healthy. So this matter of conflict resolution, the reality is that in our country, we have had student-on-student violence, and that is just not a good look. But what are the possibilities? There is a better way. We can talk about it. We can decide how we're going to resolve in a way that it's a win-win situation. Well, look here. Right now, Mr. Pitkin is talking about who dropped the ball, and he believes that the ball has been dropped from the home and is rolling all the way into the society because there are so many different factors and players along the way that should be helping our children and our young people to be better and to do better. So next week, join us for the conversation, the continuation of this conversation on conflict, as we wrap it up, talking about who dropped the ball, and then to look at what are some of the practical things that we can do to help our children and our young people to manage conflict in a healthy, positive way. Thank you so much for joining this Talk with Tashi. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for tuning in. Do join us next week, same time and on this platform, when you can talk with Tashi. Until next time, do have a safe, blessed and productive week.